The entire royal court had gathered to watch Elara Vale prove that her wolf was dead. They had dressed the judgment hall in silver banners and black mourning cloth, as if her failure had already become a funeral worthy of witnesses. Hundreds of wolves stood beneath the vaulted ceiling of Crownspire Keep, their eyes bright with hunger, curiosity, and cruelty, while the moon burned pale through the high glass windows above the throne. At the center of the marble floor, Elara knelt with silver chains around her wrists, her bare knees pressed into the cold stone, and beside her sat the smallest wolf the kingdom had ever seen. It was no larger than a winter fox, with smoke-black fur, silent paws, and eyes so dark they reflected nothing at all. Not torchlight, not moonlight, not even fear. The court called it a dead wolf because it never howled, never shifted, never answered any command, and never bared its teeth no matter how many noble wolves snapped at its throat. Tonight, under the command of the Alpha King himself, it was supposed to kneel and prove its weakness before the kingdom. Instead, when the silver chain touched Elara's skin, every werewolf in the hall lowered its head. For one terrible heartbeat, no one spoke. The great wolves of the royal houses, beasts bred for battle and crowned in ancestral pride, bent their necks as if something older than rank had entered the room. Elara felt the silence move through the court like a blade drawn from its sheath. She did not understand it. She only knew that her little wolf, Nyx, had risen beside her, its ears tilted toward the throne, its small body still as a shadow beneath moonlight. Then Lord Vare of the Royal Council struck his black staff against the marble, and the sound shattered the moment. "A trick," he said, his voice carrying to every pillar. "A corruption of the trial. The girl has carried a broken spirit since birth. She cannot command wolves. She cannot command anything." Laughter followed, sharp and relieved, because the court wanted permission to hate her again. Elara kept her head lowered, but she felt the heat of shame crawl up her throat. She had endured many kinds of humiliation in the outer kennels of the capital, but never this many eyes, never this much ceremony, never the cold weight of the Alpha King's attention, pressing down on her like a hand around her heart. King Kael Draven sat upon the black iron throne, unmoving. He was not old, but the kingdom treated him like a storm-given flesh. His dark hair fell to his shoulders. The scars at his throat disappeared beneath the collar of his war mantle, but Elara had heard the whispers. The king had survived a demon breach at the northern border. He had returned, without his Luna, without half his army, and without mercy. Since then, no one touched him, unless commanded. No one stood too close. No one asked why his wolf no longer appeared at full moon gatherings. The court feared him enough to obey. The council feared him enough to flatter. But tonight, when his gaze dropped from Elara's chains to the tiny black wolf at her side, something unreadable crossed his face. Not pity, not disgust. Recognition, perhaps. Or warning. "Elara Vale," Lord Vare announced, "daughter of a bloodline removed from all pack records, ward of the Western Kennels, bearer of an unresponsive wolf spirit, you have been summoned to Crownspire because your presence has caused disorder among bonded wolves, failed hunting lines, and 3 unexplained lunar disturbances." He turned toward the nobles with practiced sorrow. "The law is clear. A wolf that cannot answer its own soul is either dead or possessed. A dead wolf weakens the pack. A possessed wolf endangers the throne." The words were old, older than Elara's life, but they landed like stones thrown by familiar hands. Dead wolf, broken girl, bad omen. She had heard them since childhood, whispered by stable boys, hissed by noble daughters, carved into the door of the kennel cell, where she slept beside Nyx during winter so cold the water froze in the bowl. She had never answered them. Answering only made people crueler. So she had learned to survive through silence, through clean bandages, through patient hands, through feeding injured animals before herself, through holding her dignity so tightly that no one could see it bleeding. The first public test came with a silver bowl of moon water. A priestess carried it forward, her white robes trailing behind her like frost. "If the wolf lives," she said, "it will drink." Elara looked down at Nyx. The little wolf stared at the bowl without blinking. Around the hall, nobles leaned forward. Someone laughed softly. "Perhaps it prefers milk," a young alpha muttered, and laughter rippled through the court. Elara's fingers curled against the chains. She wanted to shield Nyx from their eyes, though Nyx had never seemed wounded by mockery. That was the strangest thing about her wolf. Nyx did not act weak. It acted patient, as if every insult was too small to notice. The priestess set the bowl before it. Nyx lowered its nose, sniffed once, then turned away. The court erupted. Lord Vare lifted a hand for silence, but he did not hide his satisfaction. "The spirit refuses moon water. Mark it." A scribe scratched the judgment into the royal ledger. The second test was worse. They brought in a young werewolf from House Marrow, a massive gray beast with iron rings braided into its mane. Its handler smirked as he released the chain. The wolf stalked toward Nyx, shoulders rolling, teeth shining under torchlight. Elara's breath caught. Nyx was so small beside it, a scrap of night against a mountain of muscle. She shifted instinctively, placing herself half in front of her wolf. The court noticed. "Look," someone called. "The girl protects the wolf from a real one." More laughter. The gray werewolf lunged. Elara flinched, but Nyx did not move. At the last instant, the attacking wolf stopped so abruptly. Its claws screamed against the marble. Its ears flattened. Its tail dropped. Its huge body trembled. Then, with a whimper that made the hall go silent again, the werewolf backed away and pressed its belly to the floor. This time, even Lord Vare could not speak at once. The handler yanked the chain, furious and pale. "Up," he hissed. "Get up, beast." The gray wolf refused. Its eyes remained locked on Nyx, not with hatred, but with terror. Elara felt the air change. The torches along the walls bent inward, flames stretching toward the center of the hall, as though pulled by a breath no one else could feel. Above them, the moonlight dimmed. Nyx blinked slowly. A sound moved under the floor, deep and distant, like something vast turning in its sleep beneath Crownspire Keep. King Kael rose from the throne. The motion alone silenced every noble in the hall. His mantle fell from his shoulders like a spill of night, and the golden light in his eyes sharpened. He descended the steps, one slow pace at a time. Elara's heart struck painfully against her ribs. She had imagined the Alpha King as a distant terror, a name carried by soldiers and law. She had not imagined the force of him so near, the way every wolf instinct in the room seemed to bend around his presence. When he stopped before her, his shadow covered the silver bowl, the chains, and Nyx. "Your wolf has no scent," he said. Elara lifted her eyes before she could stop herself. His voice was low, roughened by command, but there was something beneath it that did not belong in a public trial. Concern, buried too deeply to be kindness. Suspicion, sharpened by memory. "She has never had one," Elara answered. A murmur spread through the court. She had spoken without permission. Lord Vare's mouth tightened, but Kael did not look away from her. "And she has never howled?" "No, Your Majesty." "Never shifted?" "No." "Never attacked?" Elara swallowed. "Never needed to." Something flickered in his eyes. Behind him, Lord Vare stepped forward. "Majesty, the third test will settle the matter. The council has prepared the old command rite." A shadow passed across Kael's face, so brief Elara almost missed it. The old command rite was forbidden outside royal judgment. It forced a wolf spirit to reveal its true nature beneath alpha pressure. Strong wolves submitted. Weak wolves collapsed. Corrupted wolves burned. Elara had seen it used once on a kennel hound, accused of carrying plague magic. The animal had screamed until its spirit separated from its body like smoke. "No," Elara said. The word left her quietly, but it struck the court harder than any shout. Lord Vare turned toward her with a calm, poisonous smile. "No?" Elara's hands trembled inside the chains. She was terrified. She knew what happened to girls who refused council law in front of the throne. But Nyx stood beside her, silent and small. And Elara could not let them tear open the only soul that had never abandoned her. "Test me instead." The hall stilled. Kael's gaze lowered to her chained wrists. Lord Vare laughed once. "There is nothing in you to test." Elara looked at him then, not boldly, not foolishly, simply with the last piece of herself she still owned. "Then it should not frighten you." For the first time that night, the Alpha King's mouth almost moved, as if some forbidden amusement had tried to break through his control. It vanished before anyone else could see it. But Lord Vare saw enough. His eyes hardened. "Very well," he said. "Let the court witness compassion become confession." The priestess brought the command collar. It was not made for humans. It was a ring of black silver etched with old moon runes, designed to lock around a wolf's throat and drag its spirit into obedience. When the guards fastened it around Elara's neck, pain flashed through her body so violently, she nearly fell forward. Nyx made no sound, but the tiny wolf stepped closer. Kael moved too, one hand lifting slightly before he stopped himself. The court did not miss it. Neither did Lord Vare. "Begin," Vare ordered. The priestess spoke the first command. "Kneel." Elara was already kneeling, but the collar forced her lower until her forehead nearly touched the marble. Pain ran down her spine, searching for a wolf spirit to seize. The court waited for nothing to happen. Elara waited for herself to break. Instead, far beneath her fear, something opened its eyes. Not power, not yet. A depth. A cold, endless quiet that seemed to stretch behind her ribs like a moonless sky. Nyx pressed its small body against her side, and for one impossible moment, Elara felt not one heartbeat, but two. Hers, frantic and human. Nyx's, slow and ancient. The priestess spoke the second command. "Reveal." The collar burned. Elara gasped. Black veins of light crawled across the silver at her throat. Nobles recoiled. Kael took a step forward. Lord Vare's satisfaction sharpened into triumph. "There," he said. "Forbidden residue. The girl is tainted." But then the doors of the judgment hall exploded inward. Cold wind roared through Crownspire Keep, extinguishing half the torches at once. Screams rose from the lower court as soldiers turned toward the shattered entrance. Something crawled through the broken archway on too many limbs, its body made of bone plates and smoke, its mouth split wide enough to swallow a man whole. A demon, not a border wraith, not a half-starved shadow from the outer forests. A true void-touch demon, the kind old stories claimed had been sealed beneath the mountains after the first Alpha Wars. Its eyes burned blue-white, and in its jaws hung the torn body of a royal guard. The court dissolved into panic. Werewolves surged forward, but the demon opened its mouth and screamed. The sound struck them like a physical blow. Wolves collapsed. Nobles fell clutching their ears. The priestess dropped the moonstaff and stumbled backward. Elara could not move. The collar still held her down, its magic choking her breath, pinning her to the marble, while death entered the hall. Kael shifted halfway before anyone could blink. Claws tore from his hands. Fur shadowed his shoulders. His eyes blazed gold, and the force of his alpha command slammed through the room. "Behind me!" The surviving guards obeyed. The demon did not. It leapt. Kael met it in the center of the hall with a violence that shook dust from the ceiling. His claws tore through smoke and bone, but the wound closed instantly. The demon struck him across the chest, sending him skidding back through the moonwater bowl. Elara saw the blood bloom dark beneath his torn tunic. She also saw something else, something no one in the court seemed to notice. When the demon smoke touched Kael's skin, the gold in his eyes flickered, and a black crack spread briefly through the veins at his throat. The king's wolf was not merely wounded. Something inside him was already dying. The demon turned its head toward Elara. Nyx stepped in front of her. A few nobles screamed for the little wolf to run. Someone laughed hysterically, as if the sight was too absurd for terror. The tiny black wolf stood between a chained girl and a monster from the old world, its small paws planted on royal marble, its silent mouth closed. The demon lowered its head. Nyx opened its jaws, and the darkness inside the hall leaned toward her. The demon froze, not from fear, from recognition. Its massive body twitched violently in the center of the shattered court, as though some invisible hand had seized the bones beneath its smoke-black flesh. Blue-white fire flickered inside its open jaws. The surviving guards staggered backward. War wolves whimpered and crawled toward the edges of the hall, their instincts breaking beneath something ancient and wrong. And there, at the center of the chaos, stood Nyx small, silent, motionless. Then the floor beneath the tiny wolf cracked. A sound rolled through Crownspire. Keep unlike anything Elara had ever heard before. It was not a growl, not thunder, not magic. It was deeper than that. Older, the sound of a door opening somewhere beneath the world. The demon screamed. Its body lurched backward, claws scraping trenches into the marble, as if it suddenly wished to flee. Lord Vare shouted for the guards to kill it, but no one moved. Even Kael had gone still. Blood ran down the king's chest, where the demon had torn him open moments earlier, yet his eyes remained fixed, entirely on Nyx, on the little black wolf whose shadow was beginning to spread, not outward, downward. The torchlight around Nyx dimmed unnaturally, swallowed by darkness pooling beneath her paws like liquid night. The shadows in the hall stretched toward her, crawling over marble, pillars, banners, and shattered silver bowls. Elara's breath caught painfully inside her throat. The collar still burned around her neck, forcing her to her knees, but beneath the agony, she felt the same vast stillness rising again from somewhere impossible. Nyx was no longer merely beside her. Nyx was awake. The demon lunged first. Perhaps it understood what the court did not. Perhaps creatures born from darkness recognized the only thing darkness feared. Its monstrous body exploded forward through smoke and claws, jaws wide enough to tear through stone, shrieking with enough force to split the windows above the throne. Nyx moved. One moment she was small. The next, the world changed shape around her. Black smoke burst outward from the tiny wolf in a violent spiral that extinguished every remaining torch in the court. Nobles screamed as darkness swallowed the hall. Elara heard marble cracking, heard chains snapping, heard wolves howling in terror. Then two enormous silver eyes opened inside the blackness. Not wolf eyes, void eyes. Ancien, endless. The court saw it all at once. A colossal wolf shape unfolding from shadow itself. Massive shoulders formed from living darkness. Fur that looked woven from midnight storms. Claws longer than swords carving into marble, and jaws filled with glowing silver teeth that opened around the demon before it could escape. Then Nyx swallowed it whole. The sound that followed did not belong in the world of the living. The demon vanished inside the enormous void wolf's mouth, its screams cut off instantly as darkness collapsed inward like a dying star. For one impossible heartbeat, the gigantic wolf towered over the royal court, its body brushing the vaulted ceiling of Crownspire Keep, while nobles threw themselves to the ground in terror. Then silence fell. The massive creature dissolved. The darkness pulled inward violently until only the tiny black wolf remained standing beside Elara once more, as small and still as before. The demon was gone. Completely gone. Not dead. Consumed. No one moved. No one breathed. And at the center of the silence, the silver command collar around Elara's throat shattered into pieces. The fragments hit the marble one by one. Kael Draven stared at her like a man witnessing the return of something he had prayed never to see again. Lord Vare looked horrified. "Eliminate it," one council member whispered. Another stepped backward. "That was impossible." "No," said an older noblewoman near the throne, her face drained of blood. "Not impossible." Her voice trembled. "Void wolves." The words spread through the hall like poison. Void wolves. A name erased from royal history. A species slaughtered before most kingdoms existed. The wolves that once guarded the first Alpha Kings against demons from beyond the Northern Veil. Creatures so feared that even their memory had been buried beneath law and blood. Lord Vare recovered first. "Seize the girl," he barked. No one obeyed. Even the guards looked uncertain now. Nyx turned her head slowly toward the council. The tiny wolf did not growl. It did not bare its teeth. But every wolf in the court lowered itself instinctively, including the royal werewolves, including the king's own battle beast chained beside the throne. A tremor passed through the hall. Not physical, instinctual. Ancient wolves recognized an apex older than royalty. Elara's chains slid from her wrists unnoticed. She barely felt them fall. Her entire body shook violently from pain and shock. She had no understanding of what had just happened. Nyx had never transformed, never shown power, never attacked anyone. For years they had called her broken because her wolf remained small and silent. Now the court looked at her as if she carried death inside her ribs. Kael descended the final steps toward her. "Your Majesty," Lord Vare began. "Silence." The king's voice cracked through the hall like a blade against stone. No one spoke again. Kael stopped only a few feet from Elara. Up close, she could see the blood soaking through his torn clothing. The wound across his chest should have already healed. Werewolf kings healed quickly. But this wound remained black around the edges, rotting. The same darkness she had seen flicker beneath his skin during the battle. His wolf smelled wrong. Not weak. Dying. The realization struck her strangely hard. This terrifying king, the man the kingdom feared more than war itself, was hiding a wound he could not heal. Kael's gaze lowered briefly toward Nyx. The little wolf stared back without fear. "When did she first transform?" he asked quietly. Elara swallowed. "She never has before. A lie would have been safer." But she was too exhausted to invent one. Something dangerous flickered behind the king's eyes. Lord Vare stepped forward carefully. "Majesty, the girl is clearly corrupted. Void creatures were destroyed by the first royal bloodlines for a reason. If word spreads beyond this hall, the demon is dead," Kael interrupted. "Because that thing devoured it, and your council failed to stop it." The words hit harder than a strike. Several nobles lowered their heads immediately. Lord Vare's jaw tightened. "Your Majesty, with respect, creatures of the void are not guardians. They are catastrophes. The old records say they consumed demons because they hungered for darkness itself. No kingdom can control such beasts." At that, Nyx finally moved. The little wolf walked slowly toward Lord Vare. The councilman stopped speaking. Nyx circled him once, then paused. A low sound emerged from her throat for the first time in years. Not a growl. A warning. "Lord Fairvent Bala." And Elara suddenly understood something horrifying. Nyx hated him, not with animal aggression, with recognition, as if she already knew him. Before Elara could process the thought, chaos erupted outside the hall. The distant sound of screaming echoed through Crownspire Keep. Then came another howl. Not from wolves, from something else. A soldier burst through the shattered doors, bleeding heavily from the shoulder. "Majesty," he gasped. More breaches in the lower city, shadow creatures inside the eastern gates. Panic exploded across the court again. Impossible. The Northern Veil had held for decades. Demons were not supposed to reach the capital. Kael's expression darkened instantly. "How many? We don't know. The streets are collapsing into shadow. The eastern districts are evacuating." Lord Vare stepped backward slowly, and Elara noticed it immediately. Fear. Not surprise. Fear. As though the councilman had expected something tonight, but not this much. Kael noticed too. The king's eyes narrowed slightly. Then the palace shook. A violent impact thundered beneath the floor of the judgment hall. Marble cracked across the center of the court. Nobles screamed as black fractures spread beneath their feet like veins. Another impact followed. Closer. Something enormous was moving beneath Crownspire Keep. And somewhere deep below the palace, something answered Nyx's presence. The tiny wolf lifted her head toward the trembling floor. For the first time in her life, Nyx howled. The sound shattered every remaining window in the throne room. It rolled through the capital like the awakening of an ancient god. And far beneath the palace, something howled back. The entire court went deathly still, because every noble in the kingdom knew the old legend. The first void wolf had not died. It had been buried alive beneath Crownspire. And tonight, something beneath the kingdom had just heard its heir calling home. The answering howl beneath Crownspire did not sound like any wolf born of flesh and blood. It sounded enormous, ancien, wounded. The vibration rolled upward through the foundations of the palace until the marble beneath the court trembled hard enough to split open beneath several nobles' feet. Dust rained from the vaulted ceiling. Somewhere outside, bells began ringing across the capital, deep iron alarms reserved for invasions and royal death. No one in the hall spoke. Even the council looked afraid now. Nyx stood beside Elara with her head lifted toward the floor beneath the throne, ears tilted as if listening to a voice only she could hear. The tiny wolf's black fur rippled faintly under the moonlight, pouring through the shattered windows. Around her paws, shadows gathered unnaturally, bending inward instead of away. Kael's voice cut through the silence. "Seal the lower gates." The command snapped the court back into motion. Guards rushed from the hall. Noble wolves strained nervously against chains. Several council members began shouting conflicting orders at once, their panic breaking through years of political composure. Lord Vare did not panic. He watched Elara. More specifically, he watched Nyx. And beneath the fear in his expression, Elara saw calculation. That frightened her more than the demon had. Kael descended the final step of the throne dais and stopped directly in front of her. Up close, the king smelled of steel, winter smoke, and decay hidden beneath expensive oils. The scent lingered underneath his blood, sharp and wrong. His wolf truly was dying. No one else seemed able to sense it, but Nyx could. The tiny wolf moved closer to Kael, staring at the blackened wound spreading slowly beneath his skin. Kael stiffened instantly, not because he feared attack, because his wolf reacted. Elara felt it in the air, a violent surge of instinct pressing outward from the king before he crushed it back under control. The Alpha King's power flooded the court for a heartbeat, ancient and brutal enough to force weaker wolves onto their knees. Yet Nyx remained untouched. Kael noticed. His golden eyes narrowed. "Interesting." Lord Vare stepped forward quickly. "Majesty, the girl should be confined immediately. If the creature beneath the palace awakens because of her..." "Because of her?" Kael interrupted softly. The softness was dangerous. Vare hesitated. Kael's gaze shifted slowly across the ruined court, the dead guards, the black scorch marks left by the demon. "Your council swore the Northern Vale was secure." His voice remained calm, yet demons breached the capital during a royal trial. The accusation landed heavily. Several nobles looked away. Vare straightened. "No defense is perfect against the void." "No," Kael agreed. "But betrayal weakens every defense." Silence followed. Elara saw something pass briefly between them, an old hostility sharpened by years of restraint. Lord Vare bowed carefully, but his eyes remained cold. "Your Majesty questions my loyalty?" "I question everyone's loyalty." The temperature in the hall seemed to drop. Then, another impact shook the palace. Closer this time. The crack running through the marble floor widened violently, splitting the center of the judgment hall apart. Nobles screamed and stumbled backward as black mist rose from the opening beneath the throne dais. A smell poured upward from the darkness below. Blood, ancient stone, and something old enough to make every wolf in the court recoil instinctively. Nyx stepped toward the crack. Kael caught Elara's wrist before she could follow. The touch nearly destroyed him. Both of them froze. A violent black mark spread instantly beneath the king's skin where his fingers touched her. Kael hissed sharply and released her at once, staggering half a step backward. The court gasped. Elara stared at him in shock. The black veins around his wound pulsed once beneath his throat, before fading again. His curse reacted to her. Kael hid his reaction quickly, but not before. Elara saw genuine alarm flash across his face. Not fear of her, fear of what she might awaken inside him. Lord Vare noticed too, and suddenly he smiled. Small. Satisfied. There it is, he said quietly. Kael's head turned toward him instantly. The councilman spread his hands calmly. Your Majesty has hidden the truth from the kingdom for months. The void corruption spreading through your wolf. Murmurs exploded across the court. Vare raised his voice over them. You returned from the Northern War touched by darkness, and now a void creature answers this girl as if summoned. His gaze slid toward Elara. Perhaps the connection is not coincidence. The room erupted into panic. Impossible accusations collided with whispered fears. Some nobles backed away from Kael. Others looked at Elara as if she carried plague beneath her skin. Kael's expression became terrifyingly still. You speak boldly for a man standing this close to treason. Vare did not bow this time. I speak for a kingdom watching its king rot from the inside. The words struck harder than any weapon. Several council members looked horrified not because they disagreed, but because he had dared to say it aloud. Elara looked at Kael instinctively. The king stood motionless at the center of the chaos, but she saw it now. The exhaustion hidden beneath his composure, the constant tension beneath his skin, the faint darkness threading through the veins near his throat. He had been fighting something alone for a long time, and losing. Another howl rose from beneath the palace. This one sounded closer, hungry. The black mist pouring from the crack thickened, twisting upward through the hall like reaching fingers. Several wolves began whining uncontrollably. One noblewoman collapsed, screaming as shadows moved unnaturally beneath her skin. Then the floor exploded. Stone erupted upward in a violent blast that hurled nobles across the hall. Elara hit the marble hard, pain shooting through her shoulder. Guards shouted, wolves snarled. Dust swallowed the throne room. And from the darkness beneath Crownspire, something climbed upward. At first, Elara saw only claws. Enormous black claws dragging slowly across broken stone. Then, silver eyes opened beneath the floor. Hundreds of them. The creature emerging from beneath the palace was not fully wolf, nor fully monster. Its body seemed stitched from shadow and bone, enormous enough to fill the shattered lower chamber beneath the throne room. Ancient silver runes burned across chains, embedded into its flesh. Broken spears and rusted blades protruded from its shoulders, as though entire armies had once tried to kill it. The court stared in horror. The buried void wolf, the first guardian beast, still alive. Its breathing shook the foundations of Crownspire itself. Nyx walked toward the edge of the broken floor. The massive creature stopped moving instantly, its enormous silver eyes fixed entirely on the tiny black wolf standing above it. Then slowly, impossibly, the ancient monster lowered its head. The court gasped as one. The buried void wolf bowed to Nyx. Not to the king, not to the throne, to her. Lord Vare went pale with terror. No, he whispered. Elara felt the shift instantly. Everything had changed. The kingdom's oldest monster had just recognized her tiny, dead wolf as something greater than itself. Kael understood it too, and for the first time since entering the court, the Alpha King looked not merely wary of Elara, but captivated by her. Not romantically. Not yet. Something more dangerous. Hope. Then the buried wolf spoke. Not aloud. Inside their minds. A voice older than kingdoms flooded through the shattered hall like cold water beneath ice. The single word struck every wolf present to their knees. Elara gasped, clutching her chest as visions flashed violently behind her eyes. Black armies beneath a dead moon. Void wolves fighting beside ancient kings. Silver chains. Betrayal. Fire. Screaming. And a throne stained with the blood of wolves. She saw humans and royals turning on the void guardians together. Saw poisoned spears driven into their backs, while demons tore through the northern veil. Saw the first void wolf dragged beneath Crownspire alive, While kings promised the kingdom, it had died a traitor. Lies. Centuries of lies. Elara staggered backward, shaking. Nyx pressed against her leg. The ancient wolf's voice echoed again. The blood remembers. Then, every torch in the hall extinguished simultaneously. Darkness swallowed the court, and somewhere within that darkness, someone screamed. A wet, choking sound followed. The lights reignited moments later. One of the council members hung, suspended above the marble floor. Dead. Black claws protruded from his chest. Behind him stood a shadow creature, taller than any man, its body cloaked in living darkness. Then another emerged, and another. The demon breach had reached the throne room. Chaos exploded again. Guards charged forward. Wolves shifted mid-stride. Nobles fled, screaming toward the exits. Kael transformed fully. The force of it shook the hall. Black fur burst across his body as his enormous wolf form erupted through the dust and torchlight, larger than any living alpha in the kingdom. His eyes blazed molten gold as he slammed into the nearest shadow creature hard enough to crush stone beneath them. But Elara saw it immediately. The black corruption spread faster during his transformation, like poison feeding on his power. One of the creatures lunged toward her. Before she could move, Kael's wolf tore it apart in midair. The king landed between Elara and the monsters, snarling violently, protecting her. The realization hit both of them at once. Kael froze. His wolf's eyes locked onto hers. For one dangerous heartbeat, the court disappeared around them, the screams, the blood, the collapsing throne room. Only instinct remained. Possession, recognition, and something frighteningly close to a mate bond beginning to awaken beneath all that darkness. Kael stepped backward immediately, as if resisting himself. That hesitation nearly killed him. A shadow beast burst from the collapsing floor behind him and drove black claws deep into his side. The Alpha King roared in agony, and this time, the corruption inside him answered. Black veins exploded across his massive wolf form. The entire court watched in horror as their king began transforming into something monstrous before their eyes. The scream that tore from Kael's throat did not sound entirely wolf anymore. It sounded wrong, ancien, corrupted. The entire throne room recoiled as darkness spread violently through his massive wolf form, black veins crawling beneath silver-black fur like living cracks splitting through stone. The shadow creature still clung to his side, its claws buried deep inside him, feeding the corruption already, poisoning his blood. Kael ripped it apart with brutal force, but the damage had already been done. He staggered backward across the shattered marble, breathing hard, and for the first time since Elara had entered Crownspire Keep, fear moved openly through the court. Not fear of demons, fear of their king. Majesty, one guard whispered. Kael's wolf lifted its head sharply toward the sound. The gold in his eyes flickered. Then one eye darkened completely. Black. Void black. The guard stumbled backward instantly. Several nobles began shouting at once. He's turning. The corruption. Protect the throne. No, Lord Vare snapped. Protect yourselves. The councilman's voice cut through the chaos with horrifying calm. He was afraid. Yes, but not surprised. His gaze remained fixed on Kael, with the focus of a man watching a trap finally spring shut. Elara felt it immediately. This was not an accident. Vare had known the corruption inside the king was worsening, maybe longer than Kael realized himself. Nyx growled softly beside her. The sound was enough to make the buried void wolf beneath the throne stir again. Massive chains groaned in the darkness below as the ancient creature shifted beneath the broken foundations of the palace. Shadow creatures continued pouring into the hall. Not dozens. Hundreds. They crawled through cracks in the stone like living smoke given claws and teeth, their pale eyes burning beneath black mist. Guards fought desperately to hold the entrances, but the creatures moved unnaturally fast, tearing through wolves and soldiers alike. The capital was falling, and at the center of it all stood a king slowly becoming the very thing he had spent years fighting. Kael tried to regain control. Elara saw it in the violent tremors running through his massive body. His claws carved trenches into the marble beneath him as he forced himself backward from the court, away from the nobles, away from the terrified guards, away from her, because somewhere beneath the corruption, he still knew exactly what he was becoming. "Get out," he growled. The words barely sounded human. No one moved. Kael's blackened eye locked onto Lord Vare. Now, the force of the Alpha Command exploded through the room. Nobles collapsed to their knees instantly. Guards scrambled toward the exits. Wolves whined and fled. But Elara remained standing, not because she resisted him, because the command never touched her. Kael noticed. Even through the corruption, he noticed. His breathing roughened. The darkness beneath his fur pulsed violently again. Then he looked away from her with visible effort. "Take her." Lord Vare ordered the guards immediately. Before the creature fully bonds to the king, 2 soldiers grabbed Elara's arms. Nyx moved faster than either of them could see. One moment the little wolf stood beside Elara. The next, both guards hit the marble screaming. Their armor split apart by invisible force. No one saw Nyx attack. No blood stained her jaws. But the men crawled backward in terror, their faces pale as death. Kael's wolf watched Nyx carefully now. Not as prey, not as a threat, as something equal. Another shadow creature lunged toward Elara from the collapsing balcony above. Kael killed it instantly. His enormous body slammed through black smoke and claws before the creature could touch her. He landed between Elara and the monster remains, chest heaving violently, protecting her again. The court saw it this time. So did Lord Vare, and hatred flashed openly across the councilman's face. The king had not protected anyone instinctively since his former Luna died, yet he kept choosing Elara, even while losing himself. Vare's voice rose sharply. "Look at him. The girl is accelerating the corruption." The accusation spread through the terrified nobles instantly because they wanted someone to blame. A frightened kingdom always did. She brought the void. She awakened the buried beast. She corrupted the Alpha King. Elara stepped backward slowly as the accusations crashed toward her from every side. The old shame returned immediately, sharp enough to steal her breath. Her entire life, people had looked at her as though disaster followed her shadow. A dead wolf, a cursed spirit, a mistake the kingdom regretted keeping alive. And now the throne room burned around her, while the king transformed into a monster. Part of her wanted to believe them. That was the cruelest wound they had ever given her. Not hatred, but the fear that maybe they had always been right. Nyx pressed against her leg, steady, present, never afraid of her. The tiny wolf looked up at her with those endless black eyes, and suddenly Elara remembered every winter night they had survived together in the outer kennels. Every wound Nyx had licked clean. Every moment the little wolf had stayed awake beside her, while others locked her outside during snowstorms because her dead wolf made real wolves uneasy. Nyx had never abandoned her, not once. A scream echoed from the eastern side of the hall. A child. Elara turned instinctively. One of the young servant boys was trapped beneath fallen stone near the shattered balcony, while shadow creatures crawled toward him through smoke and debris. The guards were too overwhelmed to reach him. No one else moved. The nobles only backed farther away. Kael saw it too. His body tensed violently, but the corruption inside him surged the moment he tried to move toward the child. Black veins spread across his throat and jaw. His wolf staggered, claws scraping helplessly against marble as he fought for control. He could not protect the boy without risking losing himself entirely. The realization hit him hard enough that Elara felt the fury and shame radiating from him like heat. Then she ran. "Elara!" someone shouted behind her. She ignored it. The world narrowed to the frightened child, trapped beneath stone, and the monsters closing in around him. She slid across broken marble beside him, just as the first shadow creature lunged. Nyx intercepted it. Darkness exploded outward as the little wolf tore through the creature in a blur of silver-black claws. Another beast came from above, Elara grabbed a fallen spear and drove it upward instinctively. The spear shattered against the creature's skull. Worthless. The shadow beast opened its jaws, and the buried void wolf beneath the palace growled. The entire throne room shook. Black chains burst upward through the cracked floor like living serpents, wrapping around the shadow creature midair and dragging it screaming into the darkness below Crownspire. The court went silent again. Elara stared down at her own hands in shock. The chains had answered her fear. Not Kael's authority. Not the council's command. Hers. The child clung to her arm, crying, and suddenly every eye in the throne room turned toward her with something worse than hatred. Ava. Lord Vare looked terrified now, because he understood before anyone else did. The void beneath Crownspire was not obeying the Alpha King anymore. It was obeying her. Kael understood too. Even through the corruption devouring him, his wolf stared at Elara, as though seeing destiny unfold into something dangerous and irreversible. Then the buried wolf spoke again inside every mind in the throne room. The lost bloodline returns. The words struck like thunder. Several older nobles went pale instantly. One woman dropped to her knees, whispering old prayers beneath her breath. Elara felt cold spread through her chest. Lost bloodline. She remembered fragments suddenly. Not memories exactly. Stories her mother once whispered before she died. Stories about wolves erased from royal history. About guardians buried beneath kingdoms. About a betrayal hidden so deeply that even speaking of it became punishable by death. Her mother had always ended the stories the same way. The kingdom did not survive because the void wolves were monsters. She used to whisper softly beside winter fires. The kingdom survived because they chose to protect people who feared them. Elara had been too young then to understand why her mother cried afterward. Now she did. Lord Vare stepped backward carefully toward the surviving council guards. "Kill the girl," he ordered quietly. Several guards hesitated. Then Kael snarled. The sound froze the entire room. Corrupted or not, he was still the Alpha King, and his wolf had chosen a side. Vare's expression hardened instantly. "You would doom the kingdom for her?" Kael's breathing was ragged now, the corruption visibly spreading across his body beneath torn fur and blood. But when he spoke, his voice carried enough force to silence every noble present. "No," he said softly. Then his blackened eye fixed on Vare with terrifying clarity. "I think you already did." The councilman's face changed. Not guilt. Panic. Because Kael had finally seen it too. The demon breach. The weakened northern veil. The sudden collapse beneath Crownspire. Someone inside the kingdom had been feeding the void for years, and Lord Vare knew far too much. A horn suddenly sounded outside the palace. Lum. Desperate. Then came another. The western gates had fallen. The capital was being overrun, and somewhere beneath the chaos, rising through Crownspire, Keep, something ancient continued waking. Something that had waited centuries for the heir of the void wolves to come home. The war horns did not stop. They echoed across the capital in long, desperate waves that rolled through the shattered throne room like the final heartbeat of a dying kingdom. Beyond the broken windows of Crownspire Keep, smoke now climbed into the night sky from the lower districts. Fires spread through the eastern wards. Wolves howled in panic somewhere below the palace walls while bells rang without rhythm or command. The capital of Ashmore was collapsing, and in the center of its ruin stood a girl, once mocked for carrying a dead wolf. Elara could feel every eye in the throne room fixed on her now. Not with ridicule anymore, with fear. That frightened her more. The child she had pulled from the rubble still clung to her arm, shaking violently. She eased him behind her while Nyx prowled silently at her side. The tiny wolf's paws left faint trails of black smoke against the cracked marble now, disappearing seconds later like shadows swallowing themselves. The buried void wolf stirred again beneath the throne room. Massive chains groaned below the floor. Waiting. Kael stepped forward despite the corruption spreading through his body. His wolf form towered over the ruined court, immense shoulders rising and falling heavily with each breath. Black veins continued crawling beneath his fur. spreading outward from the wound in his side like poison seeking his heart. But he still positioned himself between Elara and the council, protecting her. Even now, Lord Vare noticed every second of it. "You're weakening," the councilman said quietly. Kael's ears flattened. Vare's gaze sharpened. "How long before you lose control completely? Another hour? Less?" He stepped closer despite the danger, voice lowering. "Tell them, Your Majesty. Tell the court what happened beyond the Northern Veil." Silence spread again. The surviving nobles watched Kael carefully. And for the first time since Elara had entered Crownspire, uncertainty touched the throne. Kael said nothing. Lord Vare smiled thinly. "You cannot even deny it." A pulse of rage moved through Kael's massive body. The corruption answered instantly. Black smoke burst violently from his fur, twisting through the air like living shadow. Several nobles screamed and backed away. Elara saw the pain in his eyes. Not physical pain. Shame. Whatever happened beyond the veil haunted him deeply enough that he would rather let the court fear him than speak of it aloud. Vare knew exactly where to strike. He crossed the northern border with 12,000 soldiers, the councilman announced to the hall, and returned with barely 3,000 alive. Murmurs spread instantly. His Luna died there. His wolf returned, tainted. And since then, the void breaches have worsened every month. Kael growled low in his throat. But Vare kept speaking. "Why?" he demanded loudly. "Why did the veil weaken after centuries? Why did demons begin returning?" His eyes slid toward Elara. "Because something ancient woke beyond the border. Something the first kings tried to erase forever." Nyx bared her teeth softly. The councilman saw it, and fear flickered across his face again. "Good," Elara thought suddenly. The realization startled her, not because she wanted revenge, because for the first time in her life, the people who hurt her looked uncertain too. Kael shifted slightly closer to her, protective, instinctive, dangerous. The mate bond pulsed faintly again between them beneath all the blood and chaos surrounding the throne room. Elara felt it now, not fully formed, not complete, but growing stronger every time he chose her over the court. And Kael hated it. Not her. The vulnerability, the loss of control. His wolf wanted her near despite the corruption devouring him. That terrified him. Elara. The sound of her name in his voice startled her. No one had ever spoken it carefully before. Kael's gaze locked onto hers. "Come here." The command was quiet. "Urgent." Before she could move, Lord Vare raised a silver dagger toward the shattered ceiling. Archers. The betrayal happened instantly. Hidden doors above the throne room burst open as armored crossbowmen emerged along the upper balconies. Not royal guards. Council soldiers. Their weapons were already loaded with silver-black arrows glowing faintly with forbidden runes. Void-killing weapons. Kael reacted immediately. Down. The first volley exploded through the hall. Chaos erupted again. Bolts shattered pillars and tore through fleeing nobles. Wolves screamed. Guards crashed into one another as the throne room became a slaughterhouse of silver and blood. Kael lunged toward Elara. 3 arrows struck him midair. The Alpha King roared as silver-black metal pierced deep into his shoulder and chest. The corruption beneath his skin exploded violently outward in response. Black smoke burst from his wounds hard enough to crack the marble floor beneath him. The court stared in horror. Those were not ordinary weapons. Someone had forged them specifically for him. Lord Vare never looked surprised. Traitor, Elara realized. Not merely corrupt. This entire attack had been planned. "Kill the void heir," Vare shouted over the chaos. "Before the buried beast fully awakens." The archers turned toward Elara. Nyx transformed first. Darkness exploded outward as the tiny wolf became a storm of black smoke and silver claws. Bolts vanished inside the darkness surrounding her body, swallowed whole before they could strike Elara. Then Nyx moved through the hall like living night. Archers screamed. One vanished entirely into shadow. Another was thrown from the balcony hard enough to shatter stone below. The surviving nobles fled in panic. Elara ran toward Kael. The king had fallen to one knee beside the throne dais, breathing hard as black corruption spread around the arrows lodged in his body. His wolf form flickered violently, struggling to hold shape. The silver-black runes burned him from the inside. "Elara, don't," he growled. She ignored him and reached for the nearest arrow. The moment her fingers touched the weapon, the rune shattered. Kael froze. The black corruption recoiled violently beneath his skin, as though her touch itself wounded it. Elara stared down at her glowing hands in shock. Silver light flickered faintly beneath her skin. Not moonlight. Void light. Ancient and cold and endless. Kael looked at her like he could barely breathe. "You," his voice roughened painfully. "What are you?" Before Elara could answer, Nick suddenly snarled toward the broken western wall. Too late. The creature crashed through stone in an explosion of dust and black fire. Not a shadow beast. Not a demon. Wolf. A monstrous werewolf larger than Kael himself, armored in silver chains and void runes. Its fur was gray-white beneath layers of scars, and its eyes glowed unnatural blue. Rider wolves. The old execution beasts of the royal bloodlines. The creature landed heavily between Vair's soldiers and the throne, and riding on its back sat a woman dressed entirely in white armor stained with ash. Lady Seraphine, the dead Luna candidate. The court gasped in horror. Elara recognized her name instantly. Every servant in Crownspire knew the story. Seraphine had once been chosen as Kael's future Luna, before disappearing during the Northern War, alongside the king's first mate. Most believed her dead. Kael's entire body went rigid. Not with love, with fury. Seraphine dismounted slowly, silver hair whipping around her in the cold wind pouring through the broken walls. Her gaze moved across the ruined throne room before settling on Kael. "You survived longer than expected," she said softly. The hatred in Kael's eyes became terrifying. "You opened the veil." Seraphine smiled faintly. "I saved us." The words stunned the remaining court silent. She walked forward calmly while shadow creatures crawled through the broken city behind her. None attacked her. They obeyed her. Elara felt dread coil coldly through her chest. Seraphine's gaze shifted toward her at last, and for the first time that night, Elara understood what true hatred looked like. "So this is the heir," Seraphine murmured. "Smaller than I imagined." Nick stepped in front of Elara instantly. Seraphine laughed quietly. "Still protective, just like before." Kael rose unsteadily, despite the arrows still lodged in his body. "Stay away from her." The command shook the hall, but Seraphine only looked at him sadly. "You still don't understand, Kael." Her voice softened. The Void Wolves were never meant to protect humans forever. They were meant to choose rulers worthy of survival. Her gaze swept across the terrified nobles and fleeing council members. "Look at this kingdom. Weak men wearing crowns while demons gather at the veil." Then she looked back at Elara. "The heir changes everything." Lord Vair approached carefully. "The throne is ready. Once the buried wolf awakens fully." Kael turned toward him so violently that even Seraphine stepped back slightly. "You." The word came out almost inhuman. Real fear crossed Vair's face. Kael's wolf remembered now. The betrayal. The poison. The Northern War. Vair had helped orchestrate it all. Not to destroy the kingdom. To force evolution. Through catastrophe. Madness, disguised as salvation. "You fed the veil," Kael growled. Vair lifted his chin, because the kingdom stagnated under weak bloodlines. His eyes moved toward Elara with desperate intensity, but her blood changes everything. The heir can control the void itself. "No," Kael snarled. The corruption burst violently across his body again, and suddenly Elara understood the terrible truth. The void was not merely infecting him. It was trying to turn him into something capable of controlling the buried wolf by force. A king remade into a monster. Seraphine stepped closer to Elara slowly. "Come willingly," she said softly, "before the court decides to burn you like they burned the others." Elara froze. The others. Nyx's ears flattened instantly. And beneath the palace, the buried void wolf roared with grief. The sound shook the entire capital, because Elara finally understood what the kingdom had truly buried beneath Crownspire. Not monsters. An entire bloodline. Her bloodline. The roar beneath Crownspire shook the capital hard enough to split towers. Windows burst across the upper districts. Stone cracked along the ancient palace walls. Somewhere below the throne room, deep beneath layers of buried kingdoms and forgotten tombs, the chained void wolf screamed its grief into the foundations of Ashmore, and every wolf in the city howled in answer. Elara stood frozen beside the ruined throne dais, while the truth crashed through her like winter floodwater. An entire bloodline buried, not erased by war, murdered. The realization hollowed her chest. Her mother's stories suddenly returned in fragments sharp enough to hurt the whispers about guardians sacrificed for the kingdom, about wolves that protected human kings until fear poisoned loyalty into betrayal. She remembered now the way her mother used to lock every door before speaking those stories aloud. The way she trembled whenever soldiers rode past the outer kennels. Not from grief, from terror. Because the kingdom had not merely hidden the truth, it had hunted survivors. Seraphine watched understanding spread across Elara's face. "Now, you see it," she said softly. "Why the void abandoned this kingdom." Kael stepped between them immediately, despite the corruption devouring him from the inside. His wolf form flickered violently with every breath, black veins spreading farther beneath silver-black fur. "You don't speak for the void," he growled. Seraphine's expression hardened slightly. "No, but I listened when it spoke." Her silver gaze shifted briefly toward the broken floor, where black mist continued pouring upward from beneath Crownspire. "You heard it too, beyond the northern veil. That's why you came back broken." Something dark crossed Kael's face. Elara felt it instinctively. Bine. Not physical. Memory. The Northern War haunted him far more deeply than the court understood. Lord Vare stepped toward Seraphine impatiently. "The city is collapsing. We cannot delay." His eyes burned toward Elara. The heir must descend willingly before the buried wolf fully awakens. Nyx snarled low in her throat. The ancient chains beneath the palace rattled instantly in response. Vare flinched. Good, Elara thought again. The feeling frightened her less this time, because for the first time in her life, the powerful men who controlled her fate looked uncertain around her. Kael's golden eye remained fixed on Elara. The other had darkened nearly completely now, void black spreading through the iris like ink drowning sunlight. Yet even while fighting the corruption consuming him, he kept positioning himself between her and everyone else, protecting her, choosing her, over and over. The mate bond pulsed stronger. Elara felt it sharply. Now beneath her ribs a dangerous thread tightening between them every time he defended her against the court. Kael felt it too. She saw the tension in the rigid set of his shoulders, the fury in how hard he resisted it. Not because he did not want her, because he feared what wanting her would cost. Seraphine noticed everything and smiled faintly. "That's unfortunate," she murmured. Kael's ears flattened. "You think this is about love?" Seraphine continued softly. "The void does not care about affection. It chooses balance." Her gaze slid toward Elara. "If she bonds to you fully, while the corruption lives inside your wolf." She paused, deliberately. "The void will consume you both." Silence crashed through the throne room. Elara's breath caught. Kael did not deny it. That terrified her, more than Seraphine's words. Lord Vare stepped closer urgently. "Majesty, you know she's right. The corruption in your blood worsens every hour. If the bond completes..." "I said enough." Kael's voice exploded through the hall with terrifying force. The throne room shook, but so did he. His wolf staggered visibly this time. Black blood dripped from beneath the arrows still lodged in his chest. The corruption was winning, and everyone in the room knew it. A scream suddenly echoed from outside the palace. Then, another. The western wall of the throne room collapsed inward. violently as shadow creatures surged through the opening in a flood of claws and black smoke. Guards died instantly beneath them. Battle exploded across Crownspire again. Seraphine drew twin silver blades from her back and turned toward the creatures with unnatural calm. "Too late," she said quietly. The demons weren't attacking her. They moved around her, obeyed her. Lord Vare shouted for the surviving council guards to protect the lower passage beneath the throne room. Several soldiers rushed toward the cracked floor, where ancient black stairs had become visible beneath the rubble. Stairs leading downward, into the buried kingdom beneath Crownspire. Elara felt Nyx tense beside her. The little wolf stared toward the darkness below with growing urgency. Something down there was calling them. Not with words, with blood. Kael saw it too, and suddenly his gaze locked onto Elara with terrifying intensity. "Do not go down there." The command was immediate. Personal. Not king to subject, man to woman. Elara stared at him. "Why?" Kael hesitated. That alone was answer enough. Seraphine spoke instead. "Because the buried throne will recognize you." Her silver eyes darkened. "And if it does, the kingdom will kneel, whether it wishes to or not." Another tremor shook the palace, this one stronger. The chains beneath the floor began snapping one by one. The buried void wolf was waking fully. Kael cursed under his breath and lunged toward Elara suddenly. He caught her wrist again before she could move toward the stairway. The mate bond slammed through both of them violently. Elara gasped. Kael froze. For one impossible heartbeat, she saw through his eyes. Snow-covered corpses beneath the northern moon. A battlefield drowned in shadow creatures. Kael kneeling beside a dying woman covered in blood. Seraphine standing beside the veil with black fire burning in her hands. Betrayal. Then something massive emerging beyond the northern mountains. A creature with silver eyes identical to Nyx's. The vision vanished instantly. Kael released her violently as if burned. But it was too late. Elara understood now. Seraphine had not merely opened the veil. She had sacrificed Kael's former mate during the Northern War, and the king had carried the guilt ever since because he failed to stop it. "You loved her," Elara whispered before she could stop herself. Kael's expression became dangerously unreadable. "No," Seraphine answered instead. The throne room fell silent around them. Kael's eyes darkened with fury, but Seraphine only looked tired suddenly. "He pitied me," she said quietly, "and I mistook pity for devotion." Her gaze shifted toward Elara. "Don't make the same mistake." Something about the sadness in her voice felt horribly genuine. Not cartoonish cruelty, not madness. Wounded obsession. The kind that destroys kingdoms because it first destroyed a heart. Then Lord Vare betrayed everyone again. The councilman drew a hidden blade and drove it directly into Seraphine's back. The throne room gasped. Seraphine staggered forward in shock. Black blood spilled across the marble. Vare twisted the blade savagely. "You served your purpose," Kael snarled. Shadow creatures shrieked instantly around the hall. Seraphine turned slowly toward Vare, disbelief flashing across her face. "You," she whispered. Vare's expression had become terrifyingly desperate now. The void belongs to no king, no council, no failed Luna. His eyes burned toward Elara. Only the air matters. Then he ripped the blade upward. Black fire exploded from Seraphine's wound. The entire throne room erupted into darkness. Shadow creatures lost control instantly, attacking everything around them indiscriminately. Guards died screaming. Nobles fled through blood and collapsing stone. And Seraphine laughed, not with madness, with heartbreak. "You fool," she whispered, as black flames consumed her body. "You were never controlling the void." Her silver eyes lifted toward Elara one final time. It was always choosing her. Then Seraphine dissolved into ash. The demons screamed. Every shadow creature in Crownspire suddenly turned toward Lord Vare. The councilman's face drained of color, because for the first time all night, the void no longer obeyed anyone. The buried wolf beneath the palace roared loud enough to shake the city, and the ancient chains finally broke. Kael moved instantly. Run! The command hit Elara, just as the entire floor beneath the throne room collapsed. Stone vanished beneath her feet. Nyx leapt beside her, and together, girl and wolf fell into the buried kingdom beneath Crownspire, while the screams of the royal court vanished above them into darkness. The fall felt endless. Stone and darkness spun around Elara as the throne room vanished above her in collapsing thunder. Cold air rushed past her body hard enough to steal breath from her lungs. Beside her, Nyx twisted through the darkness like living shadow, silver eyes glowing beneath the avalanche of falling debris. Then the world beneath them opened. Elara crashed into black water. The impact drove pain through her ribs as freezing darkness swallowed her whole. She sank deep beneath the surface, disoriented and blind, the ruined sounds of the collapsing palace muffled far above her. For one terrible heartbeat, she thought she had fallen into an underground river. Then something brushed against her leg. Not water. Fur. Massive fur. Silver eyes opened beneath her. Elara screamed, silently underwater, as an enormous shape moved beneath the black depths. Ancient. Colossal. Watching her from below. Nyx seized the back of Elara's torn tunic in her jaws and dragged her upward. They burst through the surface moments later into freezing air and darkness broken only by pale blue fire, burning along distant stone pillars. Elara coughed violently, pulling herself onto black rock beside the underground lake. Nyx climbed beside her silently, and behind them, something enormous rose slowly from the water. The buried void wolf. Up close, the creature dwarfed imagination itself. Its massive body emerged from the underground lake in slow silence, black fur dripping dark water across ancient stone. Broken chains still hung from its shoulders and throat. Silver runes glowed beneath scars older than kingdoms, but it was the creature's eyes that froze Elara completely. Not monstrous. Mourning. The giant wolf lowered its enormous head toward her, and bowed. The underground cavern trembled. Elara stared at the impossible sight, while cold water dripped from her trembling hands. The ancient guardian of the void wolves, the beast the kingdom buried alive beneath Crownspire, was kneeling before her as though she were royalty. Or worse, its last surviving heir. Nyx walked calmly toward the giant creature. The buried wolf touched its forehead gently against the tiny black wolf's brow. A greeting. A reunión. The sight hurt Elara's chest unexpectedly, because Nyx looked happy, not playful, not relieved. Home. Blue fire illuminated the cavern around them now, revealing something far more terrifying than buried ruins. An entire hidden kingdom stretched beneath Crownspire. Ancient towers carved directly into the underground cliffs, stone bridges crossing black rivers, massive statues of wolves standing guard over abandoned halls, swallowed by centuries of darkness. The forgotten city of the void wolves. Elara rose slowly to her feet, staring in awe. This was real, she whispered. Her voice echoed softly through the buried kingdom. The giant wolf looked at her again. Then something touched her mind. Not words exactly. Memory. Suddenly, Elara saw flashes of the underground city alive beneath moonlight long ago. Void wolves walking openly beside human kings. Children running through silver gardens carved beneath the earth. Warriors standing together at the northern veil, while shadow creatures died beneath their claws. Guardians, not monsters. Then came betrayal. Poison in royal wine. Silver chains hidden beneath treaty halls. Humans and wolves turning against the void bloodline together out of fear. The underground city burning. Pups screaming. The giant wolf chained beneath Crownspire, while kings above claimed the void wolves had betrayed the kingdom first. The memory shattered. Elara staggered backward, breathing hard. Tears burned her eyes before she realized she was crying. Not only grief, rage. Centuries of lies. Nyx pressed against her leg gently. The giant wolf's voice finally reached her clearly, then not spoken aloud, but inside her soul. Last blood. Elara swallowed hard. Why me? The ancient wolf's silver eyes darkened with unbearable sorrow. Because you survived. The answer hollowed her chest. Not chosen. Not blessed. Survived. That was all. A distant crash echoed above the buried city. The battle still raged inside Crownspire. Kael. The thought struck Elara instantly and painfully. The mate bond tugged beneath her ribs again, stronger now that they were separated. She could feel him faintly through the darkness above rage, pain, corruption, restraint, and something worse, fear for her. The buried wolf noticed immediately. The king fights the void inside himself. Elara looked upward instinctively toward the unseen palace above them. Can he survive it? The ancient wolf was silent too long. If the bond completes before the corruption is purged. No. Cold spread through Elara's chest. The buried wolf lowered itself slowly onto the stone beside the underground lake, chains clinking heavily against ancient scars. He hides his fear well. Another memory touched her suddenly. Kael, kneeling alone beneath moonlight months earlier, claws digging into stone while black veins spread through his body. Blood pouring from his mouth as he forced himself not to transform. No guards. No counsel. No healer. Alone. Always alone. Elara's throat tightened painfully. The king had carried this curse in silence, while protecting a kingdom that would turn on him instantly if they knew the truth. And despite all of it, he kept protecting her. The mate bond pulsed again. This time she felt his pain sharply enough to stagger. Kael was losing control. Above them, another violent tremor shook dust from the cavern ceiling. The buried wolf's ears lifted sharply. The traitor descends. Lord Fair. Elara turned instantly toward the distant tunnels leading deeper beneath the underground city. Faint torchlight flickered far away in the darkness. He was coming here. Of course he was. Everything tonight had been leading underground. Fair never wanted the throne above. He wanted whatever power the void wolves buried below. Nyx moved in front of Elara, protectively. The buried wolf rose to its full terrifying height. No human enters the throne sanctum. A deep horn suddenly echoed through the underground city. Not from above, from deeper below. Elara froze. The sound was ancient, and low, and impossibly sad. The buried wolf turned toward the center of the forgotten city, where a massive black tower rose beneath the cavern ceiling like a fang piercing darkness. The Heart Throne awakens. The words shook the air itself. Then Elara saw it. Silver light slowly igniting within the tower windows one by one after centuries of darkness. The underground kingdom was waking. Stone wolves along the bridges lifted their heads. Ancient runes began glowing beneath the streets. And somewhere, deep within the buried city, something called to her blood. Nyx looked toward the tower, then back at Elara. Waiting. Elara understood immediately. The city wanted her to enter. The air, the last blood. Fear twisted through her stomach. Because once she walked into that tower, nothing about her life would ever belong to her again. Another crash echoed from above. Kael. The bond tightened painfully. Without thinking, Elara took a step toward the tower. The buried wolf bowed again. The ancient city answered. Every blue flame across the underground kingdom ignited at once. And far above Crownspire, the Alpha King roared in agony, as the corruption inside him finally began taking control. Kael's roar reached the buried city like thunder through stone. The sound tore through Elara's chest hard enough to stop her mid-step toward the black tower. Pain surged violently through the mate bond, connecting them now raw, savage, almost unbearable. She felt rage. Hunger. The desperate restraint of a man trying to hold a monster behind his own ribs, and losing. Nyx pressed close against her leg instantly. The buried void wolf lifted its massive head toward the cavern ceiling, listening to the distant chaos above Crownspire, with ancient sorrow burning in its silver eyes. The king breaks. Elara turned sharply. Then we have to help him. The giant wolf studied her carefully. Even now? The question hurt more than she expected. Even now, after discovering the kingdom had slaughtered her bloodline. Even now, after the court feared her more than the demons. Even now, after Kael himself had hidden truths from her. Yes, because through every moment of terror tonight, Kael had still chosen to stand between her and death. Again, and again, and again. Elara lifted her chin despite the fear knotting inside her chest. He protected me when everyone else wanted me chained. Her voice trembled softly. I won't abandon him. Something ancient shifted behind the buried wolf's eyes then. Respect. The giant creature lowered its head slowly. The first kings were worthy once. Before Elara could answer, torchlight exploded across the far tunnels of the buried city. Lord Vare had arrived. Dozens of armed council soldiers poured through the ancient passageways carrying silver-black lanterns etched with void runes. Behind them came chained werewolves wearing blindfolds and iron armor. Execution beasts. Creatures trained to hunt forbidden bloodlines. Vare himself emerged last. Cloak torn from the battle above. Blood staining one sleeve. But his eyes burned brighter than ever. Hungry. Victorious. When he saw the buried city awakening around Elara, awe crossed his face so intensely it almost resembled worship. So it's true, he whispered. The ancient blue flames reflected in his widened eyes as he stepped forward slowly into the forgotten kingdom beneath Crownspire. The heart throne still lives, Nyx growled. Several execution wolves whimpered instantly. The buried void wolf moved one massive step forward. Vare stopped. Fear flickered across his face, but ambition crushed it quickly. You protected weak kings for centuries, he called toward the giant wolf. And what did humanity become? Divided, soft, dying. His gaze shifted toward Elara. But her blood can restore balance. No, Elara said quietly. Vare smiled faintly. You still think this is about choice? He raised a hand. The council soldiers lifted silver-black spears glowing with void runes. The buried wolf snarled, and the underground city answered. Stone exploded across the bridges as ancient wolf statues awakened all at once. Massive carved guardians tore themselves free from centuries of silence, their eyes blazing silver as they descended upon the invading soldiers. Chaos erupted instantly. Execution wolves lunged forward screaming. Council soldiers fired rune spears through the darkness. Stone guardians crashed into armored lines, hard enough to shatter bone and steel alike. The buried city went to war. Elara, Kael's voice slammed through the mate bond. Not spoken aloud. Inside her mind. Pain ripped through her chest violently. She staggered, clutching herself as flashes burst behind her eyes. Kael tearing through shadow creatures inside Crownspire. Black corruption spreading across his wolf form. The surviving nobles fleeing in terror. And Kael himself chained by royal soldiers while desperately fighting not to slaughter everyone around him. The king was losing. Fast. Elara. This time his voice sounded weaker. Uman. Afraid. The buried wolf saw her expression instantly. The bond pulls you to him. I can feel him dying, she whispered. Nyx whined softly. The giant wolf's silver eyes darkened. The void wants a king. The words chilled her blood. Not Kael specifically. A king. The corruption wasn't random. It was searching for something strong enough to survive becoming its vessel. Kael had resisted longer than anyone else, because his will was monstrous. But eventually even monsters break. Vare understood that too. The councilman fought his way through the chaos below the city bridges, killing even his own soldiers to advance toward Elara. Black fire burned around the void-runed blade in his hand now. Bring her alive, he shouted. A massive execution wolf broke through the battle lines and charged directly toward Elara. Nyx leapt first. The tiny black wolf collided with the enormous beast midair, and shadow exploded. The execution wolf vanished completely inside darkness. Not killed. Erased. The soldiers nearest the impact recoiled, screaming as the darkness spread briefly across the bridge like liquid night before collapsing back into Nyx once more. Vare stared in awe. There, he whispered. That power. He truly believed he could control it. Madness. The buried void wolf slammed its massive claws into the bridge, separating Elara from the advancing soldiers in an explosion of broken stone. Go to the heart throne. Elara hesitated. Kael's pain ripped through the bond again, hard enough to blur her vision. Will it save him? She asked desperately. The buried wolf was silent. For one terrible heartbeat. That depends on what you are willing to become. Cold spread through her stomach. But there was no more time. The underground battle worsened around them rapidly. Council soldiers poured into the buried city from every tunnel now. Above them, Crownspire continued collapsing, and through the mate bond, Elara could feel Kael's control slipping further away second by second. If he fully transformed, the kingdom would kill him. Or worse, use him. Nyx looked toward the Black Tower again, waiting. Trusting her. Elara inhalet, shakiliantran. She sprinted across ancient stone bridges toward the heart throne, while war erupted behind her. Nyx moved beside her like living shadow. The buried void wolf remained behind to hold the city defenses, its enormous roars shaking the cavern as stone guardians clashed with Vayr's forces. The closer Elara came to the Black Tower, the stranger the air became. The city itself seemed alive now. Ancient runes glowed beneath her footsteps. Whispering voices moved through the stone walls around her. Memories flickered at the edge of her vision. Children laughing beside silver pools. Warriors kneeling before queens with black wolves at their side. Her blood remembered this place. That terrified her. At the base of the tower stood enormous doors carved from black stone and silver bone. Strange symbols covered them. Wolves swallowing stars. Kings kneeling beside shadow creatures, moons split in half by darkness. Nyx stopped before the doors, then touched them gently with her nose. The entire tower awakened. Silver light erupted upward through every wall at once. The massive doors groaned open slowly, revealing darkness beyond. And a throne. Elara stepped inside carefully. The chamber beyond dwarfed the royal court above. Massive pillars disappeared into darkness overhead. Ancient blue fire burned in floating rings around the room, and at the center stood the heart throne itself. Not gold, not silver. Bone. A throne carved entirely from enormous wolf bones fused together by black crystal. The moment Elara saw it, the mate bond exploded with agony. Kael screamed. Not physically, inside her soul. She collapsed to her knees, instantly, as visions flooded her mind. Kael chained inside the ruined throne room. Royal soldiers, dead around him. Black corruption, consuming his wolf completely, and Lord Vayr's hidden assassins descending toward him with void-runed blades. They were going to kill him. Right now. Elara gasped for breath. Nyx pressed urgently against her side. The heart throne pulsed once. Then, a voice filled the chamber. Not the buried wolf. Not Nyx. Something older. The void requires balance. Elara looked upward shakily. Please. Her voice cracked. Save him. Silver light slowly ignited across the throne. A terrible stillness settled through the chamber. Then came the answer. A life for a life. The meaning hit her instantly. The void would save Kael, but only if someone carried the corruption in his place. Nyx looked at her quietly, and Elara finally understood the horrifying truth her wolf had hidden for years. Nyx had never been weak. She had been containing the darkness. Alone. Since the day Elara found her, the tiny black wolf stepped slowly toward the heart throne, toward sacrifice. Elara. Kael's broken voice whispered faintly through the bond, and somewhere far above the buried kingdom, the Alpha King began transforming into something no longer entirely wolf. No, the word tore from Elara before Nyx could reach the heart throne. The tiny black wolf stopped. Silver light from the ancient chamber reflected across Nyx's dark fur, while the floating flames circling the tower burned brighter around them. Beneath the throne, black crystal pulsed slowly like the heartbeat of something sleeping beneath the world. Elara staggered to her feet. You knew, she whispered. Nyx looked at her quietly. Not guilty. Sad. The realization hit harder than betrayal ever could. Every winter night, every strange silence. Every moment Nyx curled against her chest while darkness clawed at the edges of her dreams. The little wolf had never merely protected her. She had been holding something back, containing it, protecting the world from what slept inside Elara's blood. Tears burned Elara's eyes instantly. "You were suffering this whole time." Nyx walked closer slowly. The heart throne answered her approach immediately. Black mist rose around the wolf's paws. Ancient runes ignited across the chamber walls. The void recognized its guardian, and it wanted her back. The voice inside the chamber returned. The balance breaks. Far above them, Kael roared again. The sound ripped violently through the mate bond. Elara doubled over as flashes burst behind her eyes. Kael's massive wolf form tearing through the ruined throne room. Guards dying beneath black claws. Nobles screaming. The corruption devouring the last pieces of his control. And beneath all the violence, Kael himself fighting desperately against it. Not for the throne. Not for the kingdom. For here. He was trying not to become something she would fear. Elara clenched her shaking hands. "No," she whispered again. "There has to be another way. The void does not negotiate." Nyx reached the base of the throne. The chamber darkened instantly. Black smoke rose around the tiny wolf's body as ancient power awakened beneath the buried city. Elara felt the pressure of it against her skin, cold, endless, enormous. The void was hungry, and Kael was dying. "Elara," his voice again, fainter this time. The bond pulsed painfully. Then she felt something new. Not rage, not corruption. Loneliness. A loneliness so deep it nearly shattered her heart. Kael had carried the curse alone for months, believing no one could save him. Believing he deserved it. Because somewhere inside himself, the Alpha King still blamed himself for the Northern War, for his Luna's death, for surviving when others did not. Elara suddenly understood the cruel shape of his wound. The kingdom feared him because he was powerful, but Kael feared himself because he was not powerful enough to save the people he loved. Nyx looked back at her one final time, ready, accepting death without hesitation. Just like she always accepted suffering quietly, so Elara never had to carry it alone. Something inside Elara broke. "No." The cry echoed through the chamber. The floating flames exploded outward violently. Nyx froze. The heart throne pulsed once, then again. Silver-black light burst across Elara's skin. The buried city shook. Far below the throne chamber, the giant void wolf suddenly lifted its head sharply. The air had awakened. Not fully, but enough. The chamber darkened around Elara as shadows gathered beneath her feet instinctively. Ancient runes ignited across the pillars surrounding the throne, while whispers rose through the tower like distant voices waking after centuries of silence. Nyx stared at her, and for the first time in years, the tiny wolf spoke. "Not allowed." Inside Elara's soul. "You were never meant to carry me." Elara's breath caught violently. The voice was female. Ancien. Gentle. Nyx walked closer slowly, while darkness rippled around her body. "I chose you." Tears slid down Elara's face. "All this time," she whispered. The little wolf touched her forehead gently. Memory flooded through her instantly. A burning village beneath moonlight. A dying woman kneeling beside a crying child, hidden beneath snow. Elara's mother. And beside her, Nyx. Not small, not weak. A massive void wolf covered in blood and silver chains. "Take her," Elara's mother had whispered desperately. "Please." Soldiers were coming. Royal execution hunters. The last purge of the void bloodline. Nyx had looked at the child Elara once was, then willingly broken herself apart, shrinking, weakening, binding her own power into silence, so she could hide beside the last surviving heir unnoticed. For years, for Elara, the memory shattered. Elara collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Nyx pressed against her one final time. Love was always the stronger chain. The heart throne suddenly roared with power. The entire chamber shook violently, as black mist erupted upward around them, because the void had realized something dangerous. Elara was refusing sacrifice, and the balance was breaking completely. Far above Crownspire, Kael screamed. Then the mate bond snapped open fully. Elara gasped violently as his emotions crashed directly into her soul. Haine, corruption, terror. And beneath it all, her name. The force of it shook the chamber. Kael had stopped resisting the bond because he believed he was dying. Elara. The desperation in his voice nearly destroyed her. The heart throne pulsed harder now, silver-black cracks spreading across the chamber floor. The buried city trembled beneath them. Somewhere outside the tower, the giant void wolf roared warnings through the underground kingdom. The balance was collapsing. Nyx turned back toward the throne, determined. No. Elara rose shakily to her feet. Then she did something no void heir had done in centuries. She stepped between the throne and her wolf. The chamber froze. Nyx stared at her in shock. The ancient voice thundered through the tower instantly. Heir, move. Elara's fear nearly crushed her, but she remained standing. You asked for balance, she whispered through trembling breath. Not obedience. The floating flames around the chamber flickered violently. No one had challenged the void directly before. Elara stepped closer to the throne. You fed on fear for centuries because humans betrayed you, she said softly. And now you demand sacrifice like the kings who buried your wolves alive. Darkness exploded through the chamber. The pressure nearly forced her to her knees, but Elara kept speaking. You are becoming the same thing that destroyed us. Silence. Massive. Terrible silence. Even Nyx stared at her now. Then, slowly, the heart throne dimmed. The ancient voice returned quieter this time. The king cannot survive both love and corruption. Elara's throat tightened painfully. Then, give me the corruption. Nyx snarled instantly. The chamber shook. The voice darkened again. You would die, maybe, Elara whispered. But Nyx already gave up her life for me once. I won't let her do it again. The words echoed through the buried tower, and somewhere deep within the void itself, something ancient shifted. Not power. Understanding. The floating silver flames slowed around the chamber. The heart throne pulsed softer now. The voice spoke one final time. Then the bond must be sealed by choice. Elara frowned shakily. Before she could ask what it meant, the chamber doors exploded open. Lord Vare entered, covered in blood. Council soldiers flooded in behind him while execution wolves snarled at their chains. The councilman's eyes widened immediately at the sight of Elara standing before the awakened heart throne. Triumph. You reached it, he breathed. Nyx moved protectively in front of Elara instantly. Vare laughed softly despite the blood running down his face. Do you understand what you are standing on, girl? He stepped into the chamber slowly. That throne once chose rulers capable of commanding the void itself. It protected kingdoms, Elara said coldly. No. Vare smiled wider. It created empires. The madness inside him finally stood naked. Not salvation. Control. He didn't want balance. He wanted power strong enough to force the world into order. The council soldiers advanced carefully. Then Vare lifted a silver-black blade toward Elara. Bring me the heir. The execution wolves broke their chains and charged. Nyx transformed instantly. Darkness erupted through the throne chamber as the tiny black wolf exploded into her true colossal form once more, silver jaws opening wide enough to swallow shadow itself. The soldiers screamed. The heart throne awakened completely. And far above Crownspire, the corrupted Alpha King smelled Elara's fear through the completed mate bond. Then Kael stopped being restrained. The palace above exploded, with the sound of a monster finally unleashed. The roar that shook Crownspire was no longer entirely wolf. It rolled across the capital like the wrath of something ancient finally breaking free from chains. Towers trembled. Fires bent beneath the force of it. Every wolf in Ashmore either dropped to its knees or fled, because the Alpha King had lost control. Above the buried city, the palace erupted into chaos. Shadow creatures tore through shattered halls while royal guards died beneath black claws and silver fangs. The corruption consuming Kael had finally swallowed the last restraints of his humanity, and now the kingdom faced the thing its king had spent months trying not to become. Below, inside the heart-throne chamber, battle exploded. Nyx's true form filled the ancient tower with darkness and silver light. Colossal claws tearing through the execution wolves charging toward Elara. Council soldiers screamed as void shadow swallowed entire sections of the chamber. The heart throne pulsed violently beneath the chaos, reacting to blood, fear, and awakening power all at once. Lord Vare did not retreat, even now. Even while men died around him, he stared only at Elara. At last, he whispered. The madness in his eyes terrified her more than the monsters did. He truly believed this moment was destiny. Nyx slammed an execution wolf through a stone pillar hard enough to collapse half the chamber. Black smoke exploded outward. Soldiers scattered in panic. Elara, Vare shouted over the chaos. You think the Void Wolves protected humanity because they were noble? He laughed harshly. No, they ruled through fear. Long before kings wore crowns. Elara backed toward the heart throne instinctively. The chamber pulsed around her. Ancient voices whispered through the walls now, thousands of them overlapping beneath the tower like sleeping souls waking one by one. The void remembered its bloodline, and it recognized her. A soldier lunged toward Elara with a void-run spear. The shadows beneath her feet moved before she did. Black chains burst upward from the floor and wrapped around the man instantly, dragging him screaming into darkness. Elara froze in horror. She had not commanded it consciously. The city answered her instincts now. Lord Vare saw it and smiled. Yes, he whispered. That's it. Nyx roared furiously. The giant wolf understood the danger immediately. The void obeyed emotion. Fear, wine, rage. If Elara lost herself inside those feelings, the buried kingdom would become a weapon no one could stop. Another scream echoed through the mate bond. Kael. The sound struck Elara hard enough to nearly bring her to her knees. She saw flashes instantly. The corrupted Alpha King tearing through shadow creatures inside the ruined palace. Royal guards, trying to chain him. Kael himself fighting not to slaughter them. And beneath all the violence, the terrible loneliness still inside him. Even transformed into a monster, he was still trying to protect people from himself. Elara. His voice sounded broken now, fading. The corruption was consuming his mind completely. She had no time left. Lord Vare advanced toward her through smoke and blood, silver-black blade glowing brighter with each step. The king is dying, he said calmly, and once he falls, the throne above will collapse into war. His gaze burned into hers. But with your blood, I can create order from the ruins. You murdered people for power, Elara whispered. I sacrificed weakness for survival. Nyx lunged. Vare moved instantly, slashing his void-run blade through the air. Black fire exploded outward hard enough to force even the giant wolf backward. Elara's blood turned cold. The blade carried void power. Impossible. Vare saw her realization. You think your bloodline was the only one touched by the darkness? His smile widened slightly. The Royal Council learned long ago that monsters are easier to control than kingdoms. The truth hit her violently. The Council had not merely erased the Void Wolves. They had experimented with the Void afterward, using forbidden magic, creating weapons, creating Kael's corruption. Everything connected. You poisoned him, Elara whispered. Vare's silence confirmed it. Rage exploded through the mate bond instantly. Not hers. Kael's. The Alpha King felt her realization. And somewhere above the buried city, something monstrous began descending toward the underground kingdom. The palace ceiling shook violently. Lord Vare looked upward sharply, then smiled. He's coming. Nyx snarled. The giant wolf positioned herself protectively in front of Elara, while the entire tower trembled harder and harder around them. Dust rained from the ceiling. Stone cracked across the ancient chamber floor. Then the roof exploded inward. Darkness crashed through the tower like a living storm. Kael landed in the center of the throne chamber. Or what remained of him. The court above had called him monstrous before. They had no idea. His wolf form had become enormous beneath the corruption, black veins glowing silver beneath torn fur, while shadow smoke rolled from his body in waves. One eye remained molten gold. The other had become entirely void black. His claws carved through ancient stone effortlessly, and every execution wolf in the chamber immediately lowered itself in terror. Even Ver stepped backward, because the corrupted Alpha King no longer smelled entirely mortal. Elara's breath caught painfully. Kael turned toward her instantly. The entire chamber froze, even corrupted, even half consumed by darkness. He still recognized her first. The mate bond slammed fully into place. Elara gasped, as emotion flooded between them without barriers anymore. Kael's fear, his exhaustion, his desperate need to stay away from her so he would not hurt her. And beneath all of it, love, not sudden, not soft, earned through every moment he chose her safety over his own control. Elara, his voice sounded torn apart. Run. Lord Ver laughed. She can't save you anymore, Majesty. Kael's head snapped toward him. The corruption reacted instantly. Shadow exploded outward from the king's body hard enough to crack every pillar in the chamber. Soldiers screamed as darkness swallowed them whole. Ver raised the void blade sharply. You were dying the moment you crossed the northern veil. Kai Lunget. The collision shattered the throne chamber. Ver's blade struck Kael directly across the chest, unleashing black fire through the corrupted wolf's body. But Kael did not stop. Massive claws tore through the councilman's armor, as both men crashed across the chamber floor in a storm of shadow and blood. Nyx roared and attacked the remaining soldiers. Elara ran toward Kael instinctively. Don't, he snarled. Du late. The moment she touched him, everything stopped. The corruption surged violently toward her through the completed mate bond. Agony exploded through Elara's body. Black veins raced across her skin as the void poured into her like freezing fire. She screamed and collapsed beside Kael, while ancient darkness flooded her veins. Nyx howled in terror. Kael tried to pull away immediately, but the bond held them together now. The heart throne awakened fully. Silver-black light exploded through the chamber. The ancient voice thundered through the buried kingdom once more. Balance demands choice. Elara shook violently beside Kael as the corruption spread through both of them now. She could feel his terror not for himself. For her. Elara. His voice broke. Please. He would rather die than let her suffer this. That realization steadied her somehow. The void fed on fear, on pain, on loneliness. But Kael had spent months fighting it alone, and Elara suddenly understood what the darkness had never expected. Neither of them were alone anymore. She grabbed Kael's face, despite the corruption burning through her hands, and kissed him. The entire buried kingdom froze. Kael went completely still beneath her touch. The mate bond ignited. Not violently, warmly. Silver light burst through the black corruption flooding between them. Ancient runes exploded across the chamber walls while the heart throne cracked down the center. The void screamed, not in rage, in release. The darkness consuming Kael recoiled violently as the bond transformed it into something else, entirely not possession, not hunger. Balance. Pain shared instead of buried. Fear carried together instead of alone. The corruption shattered. Black smoke exploded outward from both of them hard enough to rip through the entire tower. Nyx roared as silver light swallowed the chamber. Lord Ver stared in horror. No, he whispered, because the void had chosen something he never understood. Not domination. Trust. The silver-black blade in his hand cracked instantly, then shattered. The void abandoned him completely. Shadow creatures throughout the chamber turned toward Ver all at once. For the first time that night, the councilman looked afraid. You used fear as a leash, Elara whispered, rising slowly beside Kael, while silver-black light burned beneath her skin. but the void remembers who betrayed it. The shadows answered her. Chains burst upward from the chamber floor, exactly as they had centuries ago. Only this time, they wrapped around Lord Vare. The councilman screamed as darkness dragged him toward the heart throne. No, I saved this kingdom. The buried void wolf stepped forward from the shadows behind him. Massive, ancien, merciless. You fed it to fear. The chains tightened, and Lord Vare vanished into darkness, beneath the throne forever. Silence fell across the buried kingdom. The battle ended instantly. The remaining shadow creatures dissolved like dying smoke. The execution wolves lowered themselves completely, and at the center of the ruined chamber, Kael slowly returned to human form beside Elara. Weak, bleeding, alive. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Kael looked at her, as though he still could not believe she was real. Then his hand touched her face carefully. Not afraid anymore. You stayed, he whispered. Elara smiled through tears. You did too. Above them, dawn finally began rising over Crownspire. And for the first time in centuries, the void beneath the kingdom fell silent in peace. Months later, the capital of Ashmore no longer whispered Elara's name with fear. They spoke it carefully now, reverently, not because she ruled through terror, but because she rebuilt what fear had destroyed. The buried city beneath Crownspire was opened again, not as a prison, but as truth returned to the kingdom. The names of the Void Wolves were carved back into royal history. The surviving council members who served Vare were stripped of power, and every child born with strange magic, silent wolves, or forbidden bloodlines was placed under royal protection instead of judgment. The kingdom changed because she refused to become cruel, and Kael changed because she refused to let him carry darkness alone. On the first winter night after the war, the Alpha King stood beside Elara atop the rebuilt palace balcony, while snow fell softly across the capital below. Nyx rested nearby in her small form once more, silver eyes half closed beneath moonlight. Kael wrapped his arm carefully around Elara's waist. Still careful, still learning softness after years of surviving violence. You know they still fear you, he murmured quietly. Elara leaned against him. Good. Kael blinked once. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Low. Varm. Real. The sound startled both of them. Elara looked up at him, smiling softly. There you are. The king kissed her forehead gently, while moonlight silvered the scars across his hands. Below them, wolves howled across the kingdom, not in fear, in belonging. And deep beneath Crownspire, the ancient void finally slept, knowing its last heir had done something no king before her ever could. She broke the cycle.